online on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's Saturday night, and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Amoncona, Nana Aquia, Benjamin Butterworth, and Queen Gammon herself, Belinda de Lucy. Tonight on the show, Sir Keir Starmer says he's changed the Labour Party. Has he hell?
Your country needs you. No, the draft isn't daft.
The UK needs to follow Japan and go tough love on fat.
Narcissist-in-chief Donald Trump is a threat to Britain.
And it's time to bring back capital punishment, bring back the death penalty.
It's 7 p.m, and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. I must say I'm absolutely tickled pink to see GB News inspiring the BBC, of all places. Their latest reality telly sensation, The Traitors, seems uncannily similar to our own gem, the Saturday 5. Treachery? Check. Backstabbing? Check. Infighting? Check. Betrayal? Well, check. It's almost as if they've taken our blueprint and splashed it across their prime time. So I can promise you, you're in for a good old dose of drama and intrigue to fix your post-Traitors cravings. Leading the intrigue, it's the quizzical Albie Amoncona, Queen Gammon, Belinda de Lucy, and our very own traitor to Britain, I can't believe it's not butter, Benjamin Butterworth. But unfortunately, it is, folks. And we have a worthy adversary in the shape of GB News superstar Nana Aquia. Now, folks, you all know the drill at home. We'll get about a minute to outline our case, then the topic is thrown wide open to the group, and it's fair to say we don't agree to disagree. And, of course, I want to know your views. Get in touch, please, by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before we get into it, it's your Saturday Night News with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Darren. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Business and Trade Secretary says there is a need for a new leadership at the Post Office as the outgoing chairman steps down. The government announced Henry Staunton and Kemi Badenoch agreed to part ways with mutual consent. It's after the Post Office has come under fire over its handling of the Horizon IT scandal. Government officials say an interim will be appointed shortly and a recruitment process for a new chair will be launched in due course in accordance with the government's Code for Public Appointments. A major incident has been declared as emergency services warn a building engulfed in flames in Liverpool could collapse. Firefighters and police are evacuating surrounding buildings. Currently, there are no reports of casualties. Smoke could be seen across the Merseyside skyline earlier. Merseyside Fire and Rescue Services say the blaze is based on Fox Street in Liverpool city centre, and they're urging the public to avoid the area. Queen Camilla has visited the King in hospital as he recovers from a procedure for an enlarged prostate. The King is resting at the London clinic for a second day after receiving treatment there. Buckingham Palace says he's doing well. It's the same hospital where the Princess of Wales is being cared for following abdominal surgery. Charles's former butler, Grant Harrell, told GB News the British public's response to the royal health scares show how much they care.
People always said he was eccentric, he was old-fashioned, out of touch. I never saw that when I worked for him, and I think that's what the public are getting to see, and that's why there's this affection. So the fact that he is having this procedure, obviously the public want to kind of let them know that they're thinking of them. And the same with Princess of Wales. I understand there's been many letters and cards sent to her wishing her the best of health.
Now, Grant Shapps says it's our duty to protect the navigation of the Red Sea after a British-backed oil tanker was hit by Houthi missiles. The vessel in the Gulf of Aden went up in flames on Friday after it was targeted by the rebels. A blaze in Marlin Luanda's cargo tank was extinguished with the help of Indian, US and French Navy vessels, and all crew are reported to be safe. And the United Kingdom is pausing funding for the United Nations Gaza Aid Group following allegations that staff participated in the October 7th attacks. The Foreign Office says the UK is appalled by allegations that UNRWA staff were involved in the heinous act of terrorism that the UK government has repeatedly condemned. The UK is suspending any future funding, as are Finland, the US, Italy, Australia and Canada, following a review. Representatives from the Gaza Relief Agency have pleaded with allies to reverse the decision. A spokesperson for the Foreign Office says we remain committed to getting humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza who desperately need it. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to the Saturday 5.
Thanks, Sophia. It's Saturday night, folks, and you're with the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, and I can promise you're in for a very spirited hour of debate. Let's crack on with tonight's first. Up first, it's Albie. Albie, away you go.
If Britain was under attack from an enemy state like Russia, is the draft a daft idea? Well, General Sir Patrick Sanders doesn't think so, and our soon-to-be GB News colleague Boris Johnson doesn't think so either. Let's see what...
Sir, Lance Corporal Johnson reporting for duty and responding to the appeal from General Sanders for a citizen army and encouraging young people across the country to think of the attractions, advantages of some kind of military training or service, because at the moment they think it's either uncool or unethical, or perhaps they're not following General Sanders, they're following Colonel Sanders. To find out what we need to do about it, read my column in the Daily Mail.
And I read it. That's the spirit, Boris. But it seems that Boris and I are in the minority, because only 17% of Brits would happily fight in a war if Britain ever went to war. 14% say that they would fight only if they were forced to, and the majority, 30% of us, would try any means possible not to fight at all, whatever happened to our great British Blitz spirit. Look, this just isn't sustainable in the modern world. As we enter a more dangerous phase in history, we've got to be prepared for what the future might bring. Look, no one wants a war to happen, and God forbid conscription should ever happen, because I'd be absolutely useless. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't prepare all the same. Look, as we enter this new phase of international relations, we've got to be prepared. Our allies like Norway, Sweden, France and Israel all have national services. I think we should bring that back. I also think that we should forget about tax cuts in the upcoming spring statement, because actually that fiscal headroom should be used for additional defence spending. We have taken a lax approach to defence in the West. We've become far too complacent with peacetime. Instead of contemplating the realities of what hot war might mean. Instead, we're focused on fighting the anti-woke or the woke culture war. We're just completely detached from the realities of the international situation that we're currently in. I would support conscription as a last resort for this country if we absolutely needed it. But first of all, we do need to sort out our defence problem. The reality is we've become complacent with peacetime and we need to start planning for the future. And that means increasing our military budget. That means starting a new national citizenship service. And that also means being up for conscription if it ever is called upon the great British people. Benjamin Butterworth, would you be up for conscription?
Well, obviously, if there was a war, then that would be a totally different scenario. And of course, I would fight for my country without hesitation. But there isn't a war, you know, threatening Britain at the moment. And so I think this idea that we should somehow have national service from people who like to talk about we didn't win the war for this, who didn't actually fight in a war at all because they're not 95 years old, I think that's preposterous. You know, the idea that we would take millions of people out of the economy, out of education, to go and practice in the army, the idea that we would suddenly find the billions of pounds that a programme like that would cost, I think it's for the birds. And I think a lot of it is just trying to reminisce about the old days for the sake of it, when it's actually no use to Britain. I'm much prouder that we have lots of people going to university, and I think we should spend that money on getting 50% of people in university places, not teach them how to fight.
Belinda, this isn't for the birds. France are introducing national service, Sweden have a national service, Finland have a national service, Israel have a national service, and thank God they do, because at the moment they're being put to work. This isn't for the birds. We should be following what other countries do, surely.
I agree with you totally. And Benjamin, you saying, oh, it's about the old days. Well, what's wrong with learning from history? I mean, history teaches us
from people
that
killing each other,
having a bigger army actually acts as a deterrent in the first place. And listen, I may be a ripe old age, but I would sign up to, at the drop of the hat, to join an army and defend this country if it was under attack, because these sceptred isles are so much more precious than the flim-flam, wet-white governments that we have in and out of season. It's so much bigger than that. We owe it to our ancestors to defend the country. And I don't blame people for feeling despondent and sad at the continuous, relentless attack on Britishness, our values and our culture, and having in government a party that won't even defend our borders, won't even defend, you know, our British curriculum being taught at school. And so it has demoralised people in this country. But I say, fear not, stick to the path of defending and feeling love and patriotic about your country.
Have we become complacent, Darren? Because since the year 2000, we have seen the Navy shrink, we've seen the Army shrink, and we've seen the RAF shrink. I mean, the entire British Army, the active British Army, could fit in Wembley Stadium with space.
Well, it's absolutely terrible. I mean, Benjamin says we need to get more people going to university and not in national service. That's exactly the problem. We've turned people into Benjamin Butterworths instead of people that are actually, you know,
educated and contributing to the economy.
Oh, educated in what?
God forbid.
Marxism and all the rest of it. Oh, that's brilliant. It's doing a real service to Britain. We're really ready for war. I mean, the Telegraph report tonight that there is utter disbelief in the Royal Navy because they're redeploying officers, viewers won't believe this, redeploying officers to diversity and inclusion teams. Now, that, to me, suggests... and I have to disagree with you, Albie, in what you said about culture wars being fought instead of fighting actual wars, right? Because the culture wars are preventing us from being ready to fight actual wars. So that's what I think is a real detriment to the nation's national security.
But, Nana, we've seen the military be cut in numbers since the year 2000. I think that predates any culture war that we've been having over the past few years. Do you think it's fair, what Darren has just said?
Well, I mean, if you think of what Putin said, that's why he's laughing at us, because we're more worried about being called a he or a she or...
Really? That's really what you think?
He did. Look, sign me up. Nambo, here I come. I can see it now. I can see it now. I've got, like, the bullet sort of belt across. I've got the things. I've got my stilettos. When my stiletto goes down, boom, there's an explosion. I would be well up for that, you know. But I do think national service needs to come back. I have literally, I don't know what Benjamin's talking about, because I think it's absurd if we think that we're just going to all sort of pick up our arms and suddenly all start fighting. We won't, as you said, Benjamin, you don't know what you're doing. What good would you be? No, that's the point. We need some sort of training to get the young people who are carrying the zombie knives and all that nonsense off the streets, out of the gangs, off the county lines, and actually focusing on some sort of cohesion. Because we have a mass immigration problem with people coming into this... Sorry, I'm not finished. So multiculturalism has failed because we've got pockets of...
What's this got to do with multiculturalism?
This has got... The point
National
is...
unity.
Listen, that's it. I was getting there until I was interrupted. But look, multiculturalism is like lots of little ghettos of pockets of people who do not unite and form. This will bring a lot of young people together. You come to this country, you want to be British, you've got to do something for it, and you do your national service. You earn your citizenship.
Benjamin, don't you think that is a reasonable thing, national service, to bring the nation together as well as prepare us for war?
But you say this, but this is having had a period of Tory government where things like community centres and youth clubs have been shut down en masse. Those are the kind of things that brought a lot of those young people together. We've seen education failing some of the poorest communities in this country. Those are the kind of places that are meant to set boundaries. And the fact is that, you know, it is a farcical idea that we take millions of people out of the economy to go and do national service.
Sweden do it, Finland do it, Norway do it, Israel do it.
Israel is under direct attack. It has been for the entire 75 years of its existence.
They didn't suddenly rack up a civilian army, as you're suggesting. They had people ready, which is why, if you watch their war effort and how hard they're fighting, they are coordinated.
And
they understand war.
And if I were an Israeli citizen, I would agree with it, because they have a totally different scenario to the one we have.
But why can't
I think
we
it's
change?
preposterous to say that we all have to go and train in the army. I mean, half of us here would be utterly useless, frankly. Where there is a good idea is that maybe people that have gone down the criminal
Benjamin,
route, who've gone down
what is a good idea is that we actually need to move on now, unfortunately. Because it is time for our very own Darren Grimes to give us what's been on his mind this week. Darren, take it away.
Well, I'll be on my mind this week. I'm asking the question, has spikiest really changed his party?
I've changed my party. Is it now not the time for the Prime Minister to admit that he has the blood of thousands of innocent people?
I stumbled across a tweet that's a bitter pill about Labour's misplaced priorities. I thought we were about to play a full video there. It reads, my mum, in her 80s, scrimping by on pensions, too petrified to heat a flat. Meanwhile, her MPs at PMQs blabbering about Gaza, #NeverLabour. Now, to me, this is utter madness. In that video that would have been played there, he actually goes on to talk about how the Prime Minister has blood on his hands, and he goes on and on about Gaza. Now, this is at a time when he has constituents whose seniors are being left to freeze, while MPs like him prattle on about distant lands. If you ask me, Kemi Badenoch absolutely nailed it with this tweet. She says, some Labour MPs fancy themselves as global ambassadors, not UK representatives, basically. Tahir Ali's Prime Minister's questions, that was the MP there, the Labour MP. That tirade was a slap to those cherishing British values, thinking Labour's shed its Corbyn skin, think again. She's bang on the money, if you ask me. Labour's still got this bizarre fixation with prioritising terrorists over Telford and the Middle East over Middlesbrough. Ali's PMQ circus was a national embarrassment, if you ask me. It's like he's more keen on impressing countries that don't give a toss about Britain or our values. Labour constituencies contain far too many of those totally sympathetic to fundamentalists who are anti-Jew, anti-gay and anti-women. And here's a stark reality check from The Times. The Batley Grammar School teacher, a Labour constituency, Batley is, he was hounded for showing a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad 3 years ago in the classroom. And guess what? He's still in hiding. This raises, if you ask me, serious questions. Can you recall any Labour MP standing up for that man? I can't. Can Labour be trusted to prioritise the rights of individuals like him over extremists and their intimidation tactics? If you ask me, their record, it paints a bleak picture. Labour seem more invested in global grandstanding than in pressing the needs of the people of Britain. I'm incredibly worried about it. Belinda de Lucy.
That was so good.
Well,
my gosh.
apart from missing my video at the start there, but I am worried about it, Belinda.
Yeah.
I genuinely think that in constituencies like Batley, that teacher has been utterly betrayed, and we are sleepwalking into utter disaster.
I think it has shocked a lot of people. The Israeli-Gaza conflict has exposed how MPs, Labour MPs, have such strong allegiances to foreign lands and foreign countries, and come across as prioritising other countries above their own interests of their own, of the UK. They don't feel the allegiance here that they should. And
Can you argue that Tory MPs have done that with Israel?
Well, no, because I think...
You clearly could.
You definitely couldn't. David Cameron is now saying we need a two-state
There's
solution.
A lot of dual
great
citizenship.
idea, Davey. That's never been thought of before. How are the Tories a nest of singing
But I
birds
also
on
think that the Tories aren't in bed with Islamists. They're not necessarily... well, I certainly haven't seen them being Islamist apologists in the way I've seen a lot of left-wingers on the marches. Definitely. They're sort of in bed with them, the hard left, the Islamists, and I think that's very scary. If Labour win, and they only win by a small majority, I think they're going to be on the leash by about 20 to 40 MPs who could start exerting a huge amount of power and control over the party. And I'm scared just because, I mean, I talk about the Labour Party, the Tories can't even call out the horrific treatment of this teacher, which is disgusting, because they're scared. They're scared of radical Islamists. It's terrifying that we don't have a party in power that stands up to them.
So, Nana, do you think actually there is a real problem that we're just simply not willing to address the issues there?
I think the Labour Party are hiding because the bottom line is the Tory party are in such a mess. It doesn't matter what they do or say. So, unfortunately, there is a mess that we can see, but it is being hidden by the behaviour of a Tory party who are talking about electing another leader now, or not electing, or choosing another leader as we move towards election. I think it is actually partly the failure of the Tory party that's managed to mask a lot of what is going on with the Labour Party, and they have effectively manipulated the media to attack the Tory party because the media are very left-wing. So they have used the absolute incompetence of our current government to hide behind all this, and it's working.
Yeah, I just want to play that clip that we had at the start there, just very quickly, if we get that up.
I've changed my party. Is it now not the time for the Prime Minister to admit that he has the blood of thousands of innocent people on his hands, and for him to commit to demanding an immediate ceasefire and an ending of UK's arms trade with Israel?
Mr. Speaker, that's the face of the changed Labour Party.
I mean, Benjamin, you must surely agree with the Prime Minister that this is a real telltale sign that the Labour Party hasn't changed.
No, because first of all, I know the Labour Party pretty well, and I have never in my life heard of that MP, and I suspect not a single viewer, unless they live in his constituency, has heard of him. So every party has, people outside of that. But let me just say to you, because you said this before, Keir Starmer's position on Israel and the conflict is basically the same as Rishi Sunak's and David Cameron's. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, it is correct.
And you've said that you agree with Keir Starmer and that he's taken the right position.
But is it not also...
No.
Is it not also correct that we are about to elect a load of Labour MPs who are absolutely in thrall to the kind of extremists that want to focus on Gaza?
It's not correct at all. It's not, sod all about the Labour Party, Darren Grimes. The fact is that you've selected 220 Labour candidates...
Why did Jess Phillips resign from the shadow
Am I going to finish a sentence?
Why did Jess Phillips resign from the shadow
Am I going to finish a sentence?
You can't answer the question. Because she resigned over the fact that her constituents...
You know what, this isn't Darren Grimes' Real Britain, this is the Saturday 5, OK? We're all going to have a discussion. The fact is that you can count on one hand the number of Labour candidates that weren't Keir Starmer's choice that have been selected in targets. The Labour Party is incredibly moderate now. And you talk about Labour having not been changed. You acknowledge that you agree with Keir Starmer on Israel, and then you also talk about Batley and the appalling case of what's happened to the teacher. The Labour MP there is a lesbian and was assaulted a great deal by the people you're trying to claim are on Labour's side. They didn't vote for her. And you talk about all these mistakes that happened. They didn't vote for her. They voted for George Galloway. And you talk about all these mistakes that have happened. Tell me, What have the Tory government done about this?
They are both pretty.
But this is the exact tactic. Here
Well,
it comes.
so I
this is
do
the
agree.
tactic. You talk about the Tory party now to cover up what the Labour Party.
But the Labour
inadequacy of it.
Hang on.
The question was
Hang
focused on the Labour.
Just on what that MP said, is it an extremist position to call for a ceasefire in Gaza?
Yeah,
That's
but
actually...
you're not-
Hold on a minute, Belinda. That's actually quite a popular position among voters in Britain. It might not be a popular position among perhaps people on this panel, but it's not an extreme position to argue that you want a ceasefire in
Without calling
Gaza.
for the hostages release, yes,
Yeah,
it is.
and it
extreme?
is an extreme position because what you're asking really is for Israel to disarm.
Yeah, and
That's an
Hamas to
extreme.
carry
You've
on.
not mentioned Hamas. You need to be saying that we need to get Hamas. You need to get Hamas to stop firing rockets. The only reason that Israel does not look like Gaza is because of the Iron Dome. So every day, even before.
So it's wrong for an MP to call for a ceasefire in Parliament?
No, even before this conflict. OK, because the ceasefire actually means Israel disarm.
Exactly.
He has not said Hamas need to stop firing the rockets.
And let's bring up that tweet again, if we can, because that tweet that said about the constituent who lives in his constituency, who actually says, look, my grandmother lives, or mother lives in that constituency, and he actually says, he or she, I'm not sure who it is, says there that they had this one opportunity, that MP, at Prime Minister's Questions, to ask on behalf of his constituents a question on behalf of this woman, and he doesn't actually. He chooses instead to talk about the Middle East.
Yeah.
You can't. Come on.
But look, I am not going to defend this Labour MP, but the point is, what is not to say that maybe this constituency MP had constituents that wanted him to ask about Israel and Gaza.
Exactly. If it's a majority Muslim
what's wrong about
constituency
that?
has lots of people from that part of the world, probably has had lots of inbox about that. But I'd just point out, you're saying he didn't ask the Tories why his mother or grandmother's pension isn't good enough, and then trying to blame Labour for that. That's desperate.
No, it's not. Right, we're going to leave it there, speaking of desperate, because Benjamin's going to come up shortly. But next, Nana's going to be discussing whether we should bring back the death penalty. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's Questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show.
Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else.
We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride.
Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse.
It's news, but it's this close to entertainment.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, cheers very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Alan's written in. Good evening, Alan. He says, good idea, Boris. Just send Boris and all the politicians. Put the world's politicians in a big bear pit with a table in the corner. I bet that would get some viewing figures. And Yvonne says, why would you fight for a country that has betrayed all things United Kingdom and allowed an invasion of fighting-aged young men to flee in their own national service?
That's not very patriotic.
Well, on Labour, Joan has written in, and Joan says, no, he hasn't changed his party, that's Sir Keir Starmer. Actually, he's trying to get the votes of minorities there. And Mark says they would all get blown away should Nigel be the leader of the Reform Party. So there we are. Up next, though, it's Nana. Nana, what have you got for us?
Well, this week, people have been in uproar because a criminal on death row took too long to die because they used a new technique, nitrogen. Oh, my heart bleeds. Not. Since when was a criminal's feelings trumping those of the victims? I'm all for the death penalty when it's proven beyond any reasonable doubt that, in fact, the person has done this. Take the case of the paranoid schizophrenic in Nottingham, done for manslaughter, which, in my opinion, is ridiculously lenient. He's the first one I'd have executed. So he's been sentenced effectively to stay in a secure hospital for the rest of his life. I'm not surprised the families of the deceased are outraged. So he's going to be doped up to the eyeballs for the rest of his life. What's the point? Frankly, I don't want to pay for him. What for? In my opinion, there is no doubt that he did it, so there's no chance that you've got the wrong person. It's a no-brainer. I actually think it would be kinder to do this than lock him up on sedation for the rest of his life, because that's effectively what's going to happen to him. He can't even be trusted to take his medication, so there's no way he can come out. If he were an animal, he'd be put down. There comes a point where mental illness cannot be used as an excuse because, in my view, anyone who kills another in rage at that moment isn't quite with it. We're simply meddling with the degree of madness. So where do you draw the line? People often say that the death penalty is not a deterrent, but you only need to look at countries where they take it deadly serious to see that it works. I would say bring it back and we can judge its effectiveness.
Nana, I don't know how you can say, after we have just been through, and are still going through, the post office scandal, which is the biggest miscarriage of justice in the history of this country, where we have seen the state get something royally wrong. Yeah. I don't know how you can say, I therefore trust the British state to decide who should live and who should die if they commit a crime, when actually they just got this huge thing wrong, convicted tens, if not hundreds of people. I think it was 800, almost 1,000 people of a crime that they didn't actually commit. But you trust the judiciary to make a judgment on whether or not someone should live or die because of a crime.
Well, if it's proved beyond a reasonable doubt.
But they thought that was proved beyond reasonable doubt.
I mean, what's your point? The guy...
That's the point.
No, there isn't one. The guy in Nottingham who was caught actually on CCTV murdering these people, he had done it beyond reasonable doubt. That is the point I'm making. I'm not talking about a little thing, the post office scandal, which was awful, but thankfully, unfortunately, people did commit suicide. It was horrendous, but there was not an actual murder of people. Whereas this guy, this awful guy in Nottingham, killed people in cold blood, even though they say that he was suffering from a paranoid schizophrenic delusion. But even then, he didn't take his medication, so he couldn't be trusted to do that. And also, parts of it appeared to be premeditated, as in he stockpiled things. So, in my view, somebody like this would be somebody who I would put forward.
We don't have very long, so some thoughts.
I would just say 3 reasons why I'm against it. 1, there's no evidence it's deterrent in America. 2, it apparently impacts juries, that they are less keen on delivering a guilty verdict because they feel responsible for the death of someone. And 3, it's too quick, it's too nice. Dig a pit in the ground, throw them in with a crusty bread, maggoty roll and a bottle of water, close it up and let them rot in hell for the rest of their life.
I actually agree agree with Belinda, basically. I think the death penalty is a cop-out because it hurts the families more than it hurts them.
So you want to be more barbaric?
Yeah.
Do what Belinda said?
On these
I don't want to
it is more
torture them,
barbaric.
but look,
That's torture. That's torture.
That's
torture. People were complaining that this guy took 25 minutes to die. You're saying you'd
assuming that you don't plan on killing any of us, would you be OK for the state to kill you when you haven't done anything wrong? Because in the US...
I've just said beyond reasonable doubt.
Except that in the US...
Not always right.
Yeah, but it was on this case.
In the US,
you've got a case
in the last
camera.
50 years, 156 people have been sentenced to death that were later found to be innocent. That's 156 people murdered by the state. And that is indefensible, Nana.
OK, right, a range of views there. Give yours, gbviews@gbnews.com. We're going to take a break, and then it's Belinda de Lucy.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five, and thank you very much for your emails. Nana, Emily has written in, and Emily says, capital punishment, really? Way overreaching her position here. In a country where convictions are unsafe and we have an unreliable police force, nobody in their right mind would suggest capital punishment.
No, but if it's proved beyond reasonable doubt, like that guy, you know, it's on camera and you can see him doing it and you're catching him in the act, come on, really?
Well, then Dam has said, Nana, totally agree with Nana, bring back the death penalty. The execution in Alabama should be applied in the UK to the murderer, Valdo Calcone. No miscarriage of justice here.
Exactly.
And then Caroline says, bring it back.
It was manslaughter, not murder.
It was manslaughter.
It was manslaughter, yes. That is correct. Now, folks, next up, we have Benjamin Butterworth. He's going to tell us about former President Donald J. Trump. Take it away.
Yes, Donald Trump is on the path back to the White House. And frankly, I think we should all be afraid. The Groper-in-Chief has seen all but one of his rivals to be the Republican nomination for the US presidential election fall out. It now looks almost certain that it'll be Trump v. Biden, take two. But I think we should be afraid about this, because this time round, Donald Trump really isn't hiding his intentions, if he ever did. He said that he wants to be a dictator from day one, and that he wants complete immunity from the law to do what he wants in office. He is showing us clearly that he is more of a demagogue than a Democrat. And frankly, anybody that believes in Western values should be terrified of Donald Trump coming back. But look, don't just take my word for it. Plenty of British politicians and British intelligence leaders have come forward to say the same thing. A former head of MI6, who knows a bit about keeping the West safe, has said that we should be afraid of Donald Trump returning because of his opposition to NATO. The last thing we need at a time when Russia has invaded a European country is to have a POTUS in Putin's pocket. And yet that's what we could be just months away from. Even two former UK ambassadors to the US have warned that he threatens the Western alliance because of his opposition to NATO. Exactly what Russia would want. So it's not just the fact that he's a groper and a racist and a liar and a narcissist and a monster. He's all of those things. It's the fact that he's a threat to Western security that makes him a threat to Britain. We should be afraid of Donald Trump back in the White House. Now, Nana, yes. I don't know whether you want a capital punishment for me after that monologue.
Well,
what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, look, first of all, if you're saying he's a threat, what about Joe Biden? Joe Biden is a threat to world safety. Whilst Donald Trump was in office, there were no wars, and he pacified the Middle East. He was able to talk. Sorry, he was able to talk to Kim Jong-un.
You think Hamas would have gone? Oh no, I quite like Donald. I won't do the attack.
I'm pretty sure. I don't know about Hamas, but I'm pretty sure that Putin would not have bothered with what he's done to Ukraine. So I'm pretty sure about that, and a lot of people would agree with me there. So Donald Trump has actually been more of a peacemaker. And as for all the accusations of calling him a racist, what evidence do you have? When he was in power, black people were more people were in work, making more money, and they are one of the biggest portions of the population that are supporting him now.
And you think that Vladimir Putin would have given up his lifelong dream of getting back some Soviet Union because Donald Trump had got a second term?
He might not have given it up, but he probably would not have done it with Donald Trump in power.
I think that's fantasy, total
fantasy.
Well,
I think what you've said is fantasy.
There we go. Albie, are you nearer my opinion? This man is not someone Conservatives should be proud of.
I'm absolutely nearer your opinion. Look, Donald Trump is not a Conservative. He's not a Conservative.
He's a businessman.
He is a businessman. He is a populist. He's someone that's very popular, unfortunately, with the American right. But I think the biggest concern that I have with Donald Trump is his seeming opposition to NATO, because that is so dangerous. And all of the Brexiteers on this panel who are annoyed about a European army, if Donald Trump pulls out of NATO, there's going to be a European army and Britain is going to join it. So you would just be making something you don't want to happen more likely to happen if Donald Trump ends up in power.
I don't think
you're wrong. You're wrong.
France, if anything, are the ones saying we shouldn't be striking back to the Houthi rebels. Why would
you don't think if Donald Trump pulls out of NATO, there's going to be a European army and Britain's going to be part of it?
Well, I was just about to say that France actually rebelled against us when it comes to the Houthi rebels.
Yeah.
Why would Britain all of a sudden...
That's irrelevant to what I've just said.
But you said we joined the EU, so that's what he's saying. But Donald Trump was insisting that the countries pay their 2%.
And I think that's right.
Otherwise, he was not in favour.
Do you know what? I think no one has had a constant attrition of hellfire rained down upon them, quite like President Donald J. Trump.
He denied he'd lost the last election after he lost.
He said... do you know...
He's been right about a lot of things.
He lost the election. Really right about a load of things. He has said I think actually that this is a major witch hunt.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people in America will look at him and say, he is someone that is willing to fight for me. Because I tell you what, I imagine many politicians in this country would have backed out at the first hurdle.
Absolutely.
He has kept going on and on and on.
And you know what? Donald Trump has more love for this country than the whole of Westminster put together. America would be better off with Trump. United Kingdom would be better off with Trump rather than what I believe is a British-hating president that we have at the moment. And the world would be better off with Trump. All these liberals having complete tantrums about, oh, well, he said, you know, women, let me grab them by the
evidence is
and
there?
have an absolute meltdown about that. Well, some women probably did let him. I know what I was like.
Apologies.
Oh, Belinda, come on. On your point about him being a love for Britain, he loved Britain so much that he didn't give us a trade deal.
No, that's because he didn't have the time when COVID hit.
Oh, come on.
Okay, I really believe, I genuinely believe we would have a trade deal with Trump by now. I think there are fake feminists and conditional feminists that berate Trump for saying a few, you know, undesirable things when they never said anything about the grooming gangs in this country. There is an absolute lawfare attack on him instead of lawfare. He's not, I don't agree with everything he says, and I don't agree with everything he does, but we need a strong leader because liberalism has failed.
He denied he lost an election.
Yeah, but we don't know.
You just rightly condemned, obviously, the grooming gangs, which is utterly appalling, and the failure to tackle it. So how, in the same breath, can you defend a man that is accused by so many women with so much evidence of sexually assaulting them?
We keep having this conversation. I agree. If he was charged with something...
So you don't believe any of those women?
It's not that I don't believe them.
It sounds a lot like you don't believe them.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm not coming to a firm conclusion like you obviously have and confirmed that he's guilty. He's not guilty or innocent because he hasn't gone through the courts and been charged with it yet. So what I'm saying is you cannot say the man is a monster when he hasn't been charged with any of the stuff you accuse him of.
You know, Belinda, when you pay people a lot of money to not go through the court system, that tends to help the process.
I'm not saying he never sold himself as a saint. He is not perfect. I don't agree with all he says or all he does, but it's what the West needs right now is a strong leader. The liberal wet wipes have destroying our culture, history, our language, everything we stand for by their spineless attitude towards globalism. Trump would stop that. I don't mind his America first thing. I think he's right.
But what is Western culture if not built on democracy? And this is a president who denied democracy. Look, I could probably get over...
Maybe he was...
I could stomach Trump if he hadn't have denied that he lost the last election, but he did.
Yeah, but you don't know that. Listen, you don't know the actual facts.
Oh,
Nana,
come
Donald Trump said a lot of things. I bet you probably... I mean, look, when they said about the COVID and Wuhan and China, everyone said, oh,
you think Donald Trump won the election?
No, it was
a hoax.
It turned out it was. And Donald Trump thought that. So lots of things he said have turned out to be right.
But not the election, because he lost that,
Well, you don't know that, though. Look, I'm...
So you're seriously saying
I didn't say anything.
You don't know that Joe Biden won the last US election?
No, I didn't say that.
So what are you saying?
I'm saying that Donald Trump may have a point. Maybe there was...
What's the point that he has?
Well, if you'd let me speak, I might get through this. He said that the election was stolen. Maybe there was something that went on there. It did seem pretty dodgy. Something happened.
Seemed dodgy? That's complete nonsense. And actually, that should terrify us, that you support a man who wants to deny the basics of democracy
I'm glad you're
and of a legal system in order to be a demagogue, someone who says they want to be a dictator.
So you've got Joe Biden, you like Joe Biden, your friend Joe Biden.
I like democracy, and I think a vote should count.
Order. Silence in the house.
So you're fighting against Brexit?
Right. From America to Japan, Belinda's going to tell us about fat-shaming over there. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere.
Are taken here.
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Thank you very much for your emails. I've got them here. John has written in. Good evening, John. John says Trump isn't opposed to NATO. He's opposed to members of NATO not paying their fair share.
That's what I said.
Damn right, yeah. And Mark says, sorry, Ben, the globalists are the only ones that are scared of Trump. Trump loves Britain and Americans love Trump. We'll see. And Dave says...
Clearly they don't. He lost.
Well, he's about to win again. If Donald Trump was such a bad president, the Americans would never vote for him again. Why are the woke left so scared of him getting re-elected? It's because he's a fantastic leader and he puts his country first. And then Stephen reiterates Donald Trump is not anti-NATO.
Exactly.
He's just pro-fairness. Thank you very much for those. Now it's time for our next debate. Up next, it is indeed Belinda de Lucy.
Right, well, the UK is fat-stricken. SOS, Mayday, Mayday. Nothing so far is working to help Brits get out of the fat ditch we are stuck in. Nearly a quarter of children leave primary school obese. Yet we are still treading softly, softly around this topic. British lives are worth more than this. Our lack of intervention on this issue will end up lowering life expectancy to what it was in the Victorian times. What a shameful legacy to leave for future generations. Could copying Japan's hostile climate to obesity be the answer? Well, only 4 to 5% of adults in Japan are obese, compared to 29% in the UK. And it's not all about diet. Companies are responsible there for measuring waistlines of their workforce. And if employees exceed it, it can lead to consequences at work, like 10,000 steps a day. And they also reward employees with an Amazon gift card for doing 8,000 steps a day. The government broadcasts an exercise class every morning. It's the law that workers across the country pause to work out together. Just stretches and movement classes, nothing rigorous, but it gets their blood pumping and sets them up for the day. They also have this weight loss app that combines virtual romance with how much weight you lose, with your love interest character hurling insults at you until you get the dial moving. Harsh, unpopular measures, I'm sure, but is it worth a try? It could start to lift millions out of poor health, become more productive, healthier and happier, and this would filter down to the children. Like it or loathe it, this is saving lives. Are we brave enough to follow suit? Nana, £6.5 billion of taxpayers' money is wasted every year on obesity-related illnesses. Are we intervening too less? Should the state get involved?
See, I don't like the idea of state getting involved in people's health
Unless they're killing them.
Because in people's healthcare, well, no, for a good reason if they've done something bad, but for people's healthcare, when it comes to actually obesity, I believe that you have your own self-control. And if you don't act, you don't use your own self-control, then what is this? Nobody's forcing the food down their mouths. People are eating too much and getting fat. And the reason why I wasn't a very good trainer is because I was like that app, and people didn't really like it in this country. I think we'd have a load of lefties going, oh, she called me fat, and they'd be suing people left, right and centre. This could never happen in this country, sadly.
That app that you mentioned, was it a state-owned app?
No, it's not a state-owned, but it's very, very, very popular. And the more weight you lose, your virtual love interest, keeps calling you fatty and tubby and hurls abuse until you lose your weight, and then you get together with the love interest.
I'm not sure you'd say that's coercive control or something.
I'm not sure about the whole virtual love interest thing, because we know that in Japan they've got a real problem with, just love interest in general.
Yeah.
People aren't having babies, people aren't in relationships. So I think that whole virtual love interest thing is a bit weird. Why don't partners actually just take a more active role in saying, oh, darling, you've been eating too many rolls.
No.
Maybe you should get on a treadmill.
Do you think we're too sensitive about fat in this country in terms of, if, for example, at school and work, if it was mandatory to do 45 minutes every morning before classes or work starts to get them out, to get them...
Belinda, it wouldn't work because we'd have the whole thing, it's freedom of choice. We can't be forced to do anything. It'd be all of that.
Well, they can pay their own medical...
Do you know what? It could be part of this national service that I was suggesting. That people do their exercise. Look, I'm very authoritarian when it comes to health. I think people should be doing their exercise. I think what Japan is doing is wonderful. Yeah. We're too fat in this country. Let's all get on a treadmill and lose some weight.
I mean, look, so if I get this app, I will get a love interest. Might be virtual, but that would be a great improvement on the current situation.
But it'd be hurling abuse at you, Benjamin.
Yeah, we go, hey, Francie, get up.
So long as... Well, that's why I do this show as well.
Perfect.
Look, do you know, the thing is, I think this idea that you can shame people into losing weight when they're seriously overweight is just wrong. People, they're overweight, they're not blind, they know what they look like. In the one sense, they don't need you to sort of steady foot around them, but I think that they need support, because often it's mental health issues, it's depression. If they didn't start with that, they often have that when they, become very large.
29%
I think you have to help people with carrot and stick, not just tell them.
But that's what it is. That is carrot and stick. That is carrot and stick.
That has not worked so far. There's been carrot and stick for decades in this country.
And they've been eating all the carrots.
There hasn't been enough carrots.
And it's not working because, let's be honest, it's really hard to lose weight. I feel really sorry for people who struggle with their weight. I don't think it's all about, them. It's the climate we've created.
But the food is terrible.
But it's not all about food.
It's this blaming other people.
I'm not one to promote Katie Hopkins, but she did this brilliant television show a couple of years ago where basically she put on loads of weight and then she lost it, and she said the way she lost it was by eating less and moving more. It's not rocket science to lose weight. So I really hate it when people say, oh, it's so hard to lose weight. Reduce your calorie intake, increase your exercise,
that's not quite true.
And you'll lose weight.
As a trainer, I know that's not quite true. There are hormones, and hormones can control and regulate how... No. They can regulate whether you lose weight or not. So some people will literally struggle.
29% of people have bad hormones.
No. Your hormones have an effect on your weight as well. So what you're saying is not true. I'm not saying that most people who can't lose weight are because of that, but I'm saying that is another factor.
But do you think it should be mandatory in the workplace, Nana? Do you think that's a good idea? At least it will 45 minutes exercise when you get to work. Everyone's pumped up.
I just know that the mindset of this country that would never work. It couldn't happen.
If GB News start asking me to skip on the spot while presenting the show, I'm not sure what that's going to go down.
We have these new jabs and pills that can make you lose weight that have been miraculous. I think the NHS should prescribe them for people that have long-term weight issues.
All right, OK. Thank you very much to our guest tonight, the wonderful Nana Queer. Up next, it's the brilliant Leo Kearse with the Saturday Night Showdown. Cheers very much for watching. See you next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. We're looking ahead to Sunday. For most of us, it's going to be very mild. There will be some wet and windy weather, however, across the north. So the reason for the mild conditions is we're dragging in some very mild air from parts of Spain and Portugal. And that will really move right across the country as we go through the course of Sunday. Back to the rest of Saturday, and for many parts of England and Wales, it's going to be a fairly dry night with the clearest of the skies over towards the east. Scotland and Northern Ireland seeing plenty of cloud, and that cloud will be thick enough in places to produce some spots of rain, but mild here. But under the clearer skies further east, we will see a touch of frost. But a bright start for the east as we start Sunday morning. Elsewhere, plenty of cloud, and again, there will be some spots of rain and drizzle around, but the cloud will tend to break up across many areas, so a bright afternoon with some sunny spells, but later on we start to see this band of rain move in across parts of Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, accompanied by some very strong winds here as we move into the afternoon. But in the sunshine, very mild for the time of year, could see highs reaching 15 to 16 degrees. And to Monday, really the country's split into half by this band of rain, so if you're stuck under here, it'll be quite a cold and wet day. To the north of it, cooler, blustery showers. To the south of it, remaining mild, but rather cloudy. Into the middle part of the week, it remains changeable, temperatures around where they should be for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning.